One of my sons came running through to me in the kitchen the other day, and he was saying, "Mum, come and see this on the computer. It's you interviewing Kylie when you were both so young." He'd been surfing through the website YouTube. I don't know if you've ever done that. I really recommend it. It's really good fun. Anyway, he'd sort of stumbled across this video clip from 1987, when I was based in Sydney in Australia during the TV technicians' strike. And we were broadcasting Good Morning Britain all the way from Sydney, halfway across the world. And there I was, all young and padded-shouldered, with big dangly 80s earrings, and there was Kylie, with long ringleted hair and a stronger than ever Aussie accent. It was really pronounced. And she was talking about how she would quite like to leave Neighbours and try a career as a singer, just to see how it would turn out. It was actually before she recorded the song that made her really, really famous, I Should Be So Lucky. Remember it? It was fascinating to see this old clip. It reminded me of the good old days when I was young and effortlessly slim and wide-eyed about the media and life and my own career. But then, looking at it, I was brought up sharp, because in the headline accompanying the clip, it said, "Veteran broadcaster Anne Diamond in the first big interview with Kylie." Veteran broadcaster. I remember once when a photographer snapped me climbing out of my own swimming pool in my own back garden. He'd actually bribed a neighbour for use of the window. And I was 9.5 months pregnant and very, very overdue. And the picture in the next day's paper was of me looking enormous, wet and dishevelled. And the headline asked, "Has Anne Diamond lost her sparkle?" A year ago, I walked away from probably what was the most awful television programme on earth. I should never have gone on it. My agent tells me that I have to look back on it and think, that's another chapter for the autobiography. In fact, that's what he always says when something goes wrong and I ring him up and have a moan. He says, "Don't worry, cheer up, it's another chapter for the autobiography." It was just like school games lessons. Everything I'd ever hated about being made to play hockey and netball on freezing winter afternoons in your navy blue knickers and white sports shirt. But me, I was inundated with letters from the most wonderful people who seemed to understand what I was going through and could barely believe the vitriol coming my way. Thousands of letters and emails poured in, saying, "Don't let them bully you off that show, we're losing weight with you and we want you to stay on. If you leave, you'll be letting the bullies win." More thousands of letters followed, saying, "Get off that programme now before it destroys you. It's mean and it's cruel and it's exploiting you and you should have nothing to do with it." I had so many heart-rending, wonderful personal letters that I knew I simply couldn't deal with them all. So I set up a website so that all of these people could sort of talk to each other, form a community of compassionate, understanding, caring people who shared a goal to get themselves fit and healthy, but who utterly rejected the bullying, hectoring, patronising attitude that is so commonly shown towards the obese and overweight. Now, my little community, my website, has grown into a community of some millions. We buddy up, we share each other's stories, woes and highs and lows. We chat, we write articles and letters, we have twice-weekly clinics with weight loss counsellors, experts, dietitians, therapists, hypnotists, surgeons, colonic irrigators, you name it. I called it Fat Happens. You know, like shit happens. I myself was strangely lucky to be able to make something good out of tragedy. But it doesn't mean I wouldn't turn the clock back and change it all if I could. It was when my third son, Sebastian, died of cot death way back in 1991. He'd be 16 now, probably freckle-faced and slightly red-haired. The outside world knows him as a bonny baby, the child whose death sparked a nationwide campaign and did save many thousands of lives. But I see him growing as the years go by. I look at my other 4 sons and I see exactly how Sebastian would fit into our family life. Over the years I've tried very, very hard to remember his life more than his death. But his death and the aftermath was what made a big difference. His death, because I was a famous TV presenter, made huge news. I didn't see the massive headlines at the time, but our front doorstep was besieged by photographers and reporters, and every time we heard the radio or flicked on the television, we were being talked about, debated and discussed. Was it cot death? What was cot death? Everyone was asking. Back inside our house, we were still in shock. All I knew was that I'd gone upstairs to the boys' bedrooms to sing happy birthday to my eldest son, Oliver, who was 4 on that day. I remember thinking it was a bit odd that Sebastian hadn't woken us all up about an hour before. So I went into his nursery and I found what I can only describe as every mother's nightmare. A little stiff, cold statue of a child where my cuddly, warm, milky baby had gone to sleep the previous evening. So I rang Geoffrey Archer. Could you get me in to see John Major? I've come to you, I said, because you're the closest link I've got to the Prime Minister. Have you tried anyone else? He asked. I said, well, I've discussed it with the junior health minister, Edwina Curry, but she doesn't have access to the Prime Minister like you do. Only I'd known. At that time, the government had spent millions on that huge AIDS campaign, if you remember it. Yet in Britain, we were losing far more lives to cot death. 2,500 every year, 5 or 6 every single day. We will have an information campaign in the health publications and through the health authorities, she said. But we really cannot see the need for a television campaign. Young mothers do not watch television. I was gobsmacked. Half my TVAM mailbag was from young mums who liked to watch breakfast television while they were breastfeeding. Because do you remember there used to be a little clock in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen? And I had so many letters from young mums who said it's so useful because you know you put 10 minutes on one side, 10 minutes on the other. Who did Virginia Bottomley think anyway watched Neighbours of This Morning and Coronation Street? But still she said no. So once again, absolutely convinced that the best way to spread the word was by television, I was forced to fight dirty. A minister is like a fireman, Geoffrey Archer had told me. La Bottomley cannot get around to every fire, so she'll simply put out the biggest, hottest and most dangerous fire first. Burn her. So I made my own advert. Now, I have to tell you on the record now, I never did sell pictures of my first baby to the press, as was commonly reported. But in Spitting Image, they featured me in a supermarket. I, or rather my hideous puppet, I was wheeling a trolley around with this screaming puppet baby in the baby seat. And when I get to the checkout, the till operator asks for some money, and I give her the baby instead. One thing I did learn is that you have to take that sort of lampooning, and even biased or inaccurate reporting, in your stride. I think the only real way to enjoy the fame game is to exploit it as it exploits you. But I really never had the stomach for that. Once during one of my pregnancies, a TV doctor turned to me and said, "Why don't you go into labour now and I'll deliver it on air? Neither of us will ever have to work again!" My next ambition is to run a half marathon. When I'm fit enough, and I'm not making any promises, so don't keep me to it, but when and if I ever get fit enough to run a half or even a whole marathon, I'll make sure it's for breast cancer, because I really do admire the work you're all doing. And do remember the strength, won't you, of buddy power. And please count me amongst your buddies.